Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and on Sundays I do a thing called Books and Booze where I mix up a cocktail and review a book at the same time. This month I decided to look at mind expansion, making this week's book of the week The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. The accompanying cocktail is Mescaline, which does not, in fact, have any mescaline in it. But it does contain 1.5 ounces of Mezcal, which is, a Mexican liqueur. 100% agave, so it's akin to a tequila, but not tequila. So 1.5 ounces of mezcal, 1/2 ounce of pear liqueur, 3/4 ounces of ginger honey syrup, 3/4 ounce lemon juice, and 1/2 ounce of sorrel liqueur. So let's do this. This book is very short. It was, I think, The Law by Frederick Bastiat may have actually been a little shorter, but this one is only 79 pages. The balance of the book is actually a second book called Heaven and Hell, which I am not reviewing at this point in time. I just went with the first one. So The Doors of Perception, I was out of mezcal here. The Doors of Perception was written from recordings that Huxley made of himself under the influence of mescaline, hence the cocktail name, obviously. In the spring of 1953, he was approached by apparently they used to call them investigators, not researchers, and that's fair enough. Times change, so does terminology. So he was approached by an investigator who wanted to looking to expand on the psychology of mescaline use. That's it. And Huxley was all too happy to volunteer himself as a guinea pig for this experiment, because in 1953, this was fully legal. Lucky, lucky duck. What did I say? 1/2 ounce of pear liqueur. Now, Huxley opens by providing some of the historical background of mescaline and how its use has provided philosophers with insight, and the chemical composition is close to adrenaline. Didn't know that. That was kind of interesting. 1/2 ounce of pear liqueur, 3/4 ounce ginger honey syrup. Oh, I haven't opened this one yet. All 3/4 ounce. 3/4 ounce lemon is going to be delightful. 1/2 ounce. Maybe I should do the 1/2 ounce of sorrel and then the 3/4 ounce of lemon. That's a good plan. So, Huxley discusses the discovery of LSD and how LSD mimics mescaline use. He also covers how mescaline inhibits the production of enzymes that regulate the supply of glucose to the brain, which basically starves the brain of, what it needs to eat. The brain eats glucose, folks. Not a lot of people are aware of that. Something important to remember. Now, I know glucose is glucose, but you can also, feed your brain too much glucose, just like you could feed your body too much glucose. So, an all-sugar diet is not going to make you smarter. Just want to throw that out there because somebody out there is going to be like, aha, proof positive, the Twinkie diet works. Well, technically, yes, but really, it was the calories in, calories out. You know what? That is way off topic. Let me pour my 1/2 ounce of sorrel and get my lemon squeezed here, because this is not a very long review. I get my sorrel liqueur. 1/2 ounce of sorrel? Yes. 3/4 ounce of lemon. And we'll get going here. Okay. Okay, so starving the brain of glucose creates some interesting effects due to the brain needing the glucose. So from here, he kind of summarizes 4 things that happen to the majority of those who take mescaline under supervision. And this is interesting because it seems like quite a few people who have experimented with psychedelics in some form or another have recommended that they only be taken under supervision. Like, don't go off half-cocked willy-nilly and just start experimenting on your own, is kind of what the bulk of this is getting at. Wow, I might only need 1 lemon. Brought 2 up here, but I might only need 1. Nice. There we go. So the 4 things you need that occur to those who take mescaline under supervision, right? First off, the ability to remember and think straight is not actually reduced at all. So he was kind of surprised. He based his book off of the recordings he took because he didn't know what was going to happen. He didn't know if he would forget anything, but he says he didn't. He kind of remembered everything. He was able to think straight. He doesn't believe he was any stupider after his mescaline use than before the use. Visual impressions are intensified. This is very common among hallucinogenic use. Things become sharper, clearer, reality, things become more real than real. That's a common theme I've seen in all the books I've read on this so far. Everything is more real than real. While the intellect is unimpaired and perception is improved, quote, the will suffers a profound change for the worse. End quote. The user has no drive or desire to do anything. So basically you're very easily swayed by those around you because you're just not sure. You just, you're open to suggestion. While you have no drive to do anything, this is number 4, that's largely because you're thinking of better things. So all these things that you thought were really important are no longer important, and there are now better things that should be experienced. And those are the 4 things he came up with. So remembering is fine, visual impressions are intensified, you lose your will, and there are better things to be doing. So let me shake this up really quick. Pretty. It's pink. Huxley was very upfront from the very beginning that he is a visual person. He needs to see something for it to impact him. He is not somebody who reads something and sees pictures in his mind, which is ironic because he was a fairly prolific writer. But to that end, the first thing he noticed was, quote, a slow dance of golden lights, end quote. After which he became aware of the realm of objective fact. Like fact is what mattered. Subjective universe lost its importance. So what, facts don't care about your feelings, I guess. Subjectivity had absolutely no place in this experience. He was looking at the objective truth of everything. Objective fact, not truth, because truth is philosophical to a certain degree. So he was looking at fact, right? Actual reality became everything with an extreme clarity of vision. And he started by focusing on a chair like hyper-focused. He became sure that the chair he was looking at was the most perfect chair ever made, ever. Let's try this. That's quite tasty. I always get a little bit worried because agave can have its very own strong flavor profile, and like mezcal, tequila, they're very strong, right? So I always worry that that's going to overpower it, but it really doesn't. This is quite tasty. Little tart because of the lemon, sweet. That's going to be the honey ginger and probably the sorrel. I feel like that's a very sweet liqueur. Not bad. He starts looking at other things. Flowers are more perfect, colors are brighter, more finely delineated. It matches the idea presented in other books that, they're more real than real, right? I mean, like, nothing here is new. At least not to me. It's new to him, not to me, just from reading. Now, after 4 or 5 hours on mescaline, so this was a very long journey, right? As the effects are starting to wear off, the investigator who was observing Huxley took him for a drive, and they went to a drugstore. This was back in the day when they had like soda counters, and it wasn't just a pharmacy like CVS where you walk in and get your prescriptions. I guess CVS isn't just a pharmacy; you can buy a lot of things at CVS. I'm just saying. Full experience, this was one of the big stores. It was like the biggest drugstore at the time. I feel like he even put that in there, like the big drugstore, the big store, something like that. And he went to the book section because even though he's doesn't see pictures in his mind, he went to the book section because he's an author, I guess. I don't know. But he started looking at works of art. Okay, that makes sense. He's picking up books on art because he's a visual person, right? And he looked at Van Gogh's The Chair, and found it wanting in comparison to Huxley's own observations of what a chair is. He looked at a book of works on Botticelli, finding The Birth of Venus, Mars and Venus, The Calumny of Apelles, and thought they were interesting, but then got really pulled into a deep dive of the intricacies of dress of Judith. All right. And he literally waxes poetic for 5 pages on the delicate draperies of Judith's dress. So apparently that really popped out at him. It was like, the detail, this is amazing. And then he moved on to Cézanne's self-portrait and then Vermeer. So he really got pulled into art. And while he may not grasp poetics, his journey with mescaline allowed him to truly grasp the intricacies of art as a means of contemplation. And then goes on to quote Pascal, quote, "The sum of evil would be much diminished if men could only learn to sit quietly in their rooms," end quote. God, ain't that the truth. Sit down, shut up, and think. Huxley then qualifies that, though, saying, quote, "The contemplative whose perception has been cleansed does not have to stay in his room. He can go out about his business so completely satisfied to see and be a part of the divine order of things that he will never even be tempted to indulge in what Traherne calls, quote, the dirty devices of the world. When we feel ourselves to be sole heirs of the universe, when the sea flows in our veins and the stars are our jewels, when all things are perceived as infinite and holy, what motive can we have for covetousness or self-assertion, for the pursuit of power or the drearier forms of pleasure?" End quote. That's a pretty powerful thought, right? You open your mind to these experiences, to seeing what's out there, and it forces you to be more introspective and contemplative. Introspective, not introverted. Those are 2 completely different things. I know somewhere out there there's an extrovert going, "What the fuck did you just say about me?" No, introspective. Look inwards. Think more. Sit in your room quietly and contemplate. Meditate if you can't do drugs. This is if you pull it more internal, you have less need to exert yourself on others, to force others to try and see your way. The world might be a better place if we all just learn, well, actually, no, hands down, the world would be a better place if we all just learn to listen to other people and assume that they might actually have a valid view. Yeah, okay. All right. That cuts both ways. So now, as Huxley came out of his mescaline high, he starts discussing the relative impact of entheogens and what they have likely had on humanity. I mean, he discusses the Taoists, Zen Buddhists, their internal searching. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is mentioned, as well as how Native Americans have actually ritualized mescaline use into their own religious practices. Mescaline is the active ingredient in peyote. He wonders if musicians would have been as fascinated by Chagall and Cezanne, or musicians have been more entranced by like Mozart and Bach. Would they have found perfection in their preferred medium as he found perfection in his, which is the visual. Now, at the very end of the experiment, the investigator invites Huxley to go for a walk in the garden. And Huxley's more or less just kind of floating there in this kind of not quite out-of-body experience, but he's dissociating from reality. And he's seeing around corners. So he's seeing what else is out there that's more real than real. Well, he doesn't, recall any encounters with others. I know that like psilocybin has a really high incident rate where people report having contact with fairy realms, spirit realms, if you will. There was it may have been Strassman's book where he indicated that like high levels of natural DMT might lead to alien abduction stories, although if you look at the Sean Webb's book that I read a few months back, not the Mind Hacking Happiness, but his other one, where he basically, aliens are real, they're here to stay, get used to it, so maybe it's not DMT, maybe people are in fact being abducted. I don't know, I've never been abducted, I can't comment on that. I'm not going back to what I just said about listening to other people and seeing what they have to contribute, assume it's real. And he comes down to earth with some hard truths, which is where the danger of entheogens and hallucinogens really exist, right? Hard truths. It's really hard to be a selfish asshole when you see the bigger picture. Quote, most takers of mescaline experience only the heavenly parts of schizophrenia. Isn't that interesting? All right, suddenly we're talking about schizophrenia. The book I'm reading for next Sunday, there's been a lot of study with hallucinogens and how that could or could not tie into schizophrenia. And I don't want to go into that now because that's relevant to next week's book. But in the 1950s, this was very much a hot topic. How do hallucinogens impact those with schizophrenia or other psychoses? So, quote, most takers of mescaline experience only the heavenly parts of schizophrenia. The drug brings hell and purgatory only to those who have had a recent case of jaundice or who suffer from periodical depressions or chronic anxiety. So if you are having the sort of chemical imbalance in your brain where you're on medication to deal with depression, mescaline may not be the one for you. Like that, seriously, this is going back to Dr. Strassman's book on the psychedelic handbook. Don't be experimenting with this stuff if you're under the care of a physician for any condition, not just mental health, but for any condition, because you don't know how it's going to interact with any medication you're already on. And you don't want to find yourself in the hospital because you got whimsical one day. I'm just throwing that out there for good sound advice and to cover my own butt legally here. I'm not telling anybody to experiment with this stuff. The reason I read is because I can't do it myself, so I have to live vicariously through others. Now, Huxley interestingly says that schizophrenia is like a man permanently under the influence of mescaline and unable to shut off the experience of reality. How fucking terrifying is that? Everything's more real than real, and you can't turn it off? I mean, Jesus, shades of the Matrix, right? Like 50 years before that movie was released, he's talking about schizophrenics can't even turn it off. They're stuck in this hellscape of reality all the time. Now, it was fun for him for, 4 or 5 hours, but can you imagine being stuck in that position, like on all the time, unable to turn it off? Yikes. Put schizophrenia in a whole new perspective because, well, I drink to blur the lines of reality. The more real than real makes me rethink my own desire to one day experiment with hallucinogens. I mean, more reality? Fuck that. Now, Huxley closes out the doors of perception, coming out in favor of psychedelics and hallucinogens broadly as an entheogenic path to seeing the truth or even finding God. And there are a lot of people out there who really need to find God. I'm not sure where I fall on this one. All right, I mean, Huxley is a good author, and he describes his experience in detail, but I mean, it's kind of a bit like watching someone get drunk or do drugs, right? It's fun for them, less entertaining to watch or read about. But I mean, some of his insights vis-a-vis schizophrenia were really thought-provoking. I mean, it was not as entertaining as, say, Henry Rollins describing his first time on hallucinogenics, but I mean, all knowledge is worth having. And so for that, it was worth it for a read. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next Sunday.